We're alive.
Hey, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening here in Chicago, but wherever you are. I'm Ariana, the events coordinator here at Love Sweet Arrow, and thank you so much for coming to celebrate the release of The Backtrack by Aaron LaRosa. Yay, yes. I have the great pleasure of introducing both Erin LaRosa, obviously, our lovely author of The Backtrack, and then her in conversation partner today is going to be Melanie Johnson, her newest release being Two Wrongs, Right? So, how it's going to go is Melanie and Erin will speak for about 46 minutes. And then, as they're speaking, everyone go ahead and put any questions you may have in the chat. And then, the last 15 minutes of the event, if there's any questions that you guys have put in, Erin and Melanie will go ahead and answer those questions. So, Melanie, Erin, I will go ahead and kick it off to you.
Okay. And I just want to remind everyone who's watching to make sure that you go to lovesweetarrow.com and look at information about buying Erin's books and also checking out other events that they have. So, Erin, I'll do a quick introduction for if you don't know who she is yet. She is obviously the author of The Backtrack. Also, Plot Twist, For Butter or For Worse. Sorry, it's For Butter or Worse. I always want to say
Yeah,
For
I
Butter.
know. It's like impossible to not be like for better or worse. Wait a minute. For better or worse. Wait a minute. I get it.
For better or worse. And also, if you don't know, she also writes nonfiction and has written the Big Redhead book, which I, of course, as a fellow redhead, loved and I thought that was really cool. So she lives in Los Angeles with her husband and three daughters. Ah, we have no, that should be updated because you have four
Actually,
daughters now.
four. I know, isn't that
Four daughters.
crazy?
Yeah, so
I know.
two human, two feline.
Yeah. I just brought like one of my cat daughters to the vet today, and she was like limping around, and the vet was like, "We can't find anything. We don't know." And then as soon as I got her home, she's not limping anymore. So
That's
these girls keep me on my toes.
right. It's like whatever it was happening. Yeah. Like as soon as, yeah, it's not like when you need it to be checked on. It's like, no, this is a real thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, whether it's the cats or the kids, they're going to keep you busy.
That's right.
Oh my goodness. So how old is your youngest then now?
Okay, so my youngest daughter is 15 months old. She's like, I mean, you have multiple daughters too. I
I
think
have
it's
two.
two or three,
I have
two.
two. Yeah.
Okay,
Both
so
redheads. So both part of the gang.
that's amazing. I have a brunette and a blonde, so it's like a blonde, a brunette, and a redhead. We have everything in my house. Um, but she's really like she surprises me every day because she's trying to keep up with my 4-year-old so much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so she's like already running and like doing two or three word sentences. She's just like really so much more with it than my 4-year-old was because she has to keep up with her. So it's really funny to see this like very tiny person like saying big things and running after her sister. It wasn't like that the first time.
Yeah, I think always with this like the second kid, yeah, they always like want to pick up things faster and just want to be a part of everything and
It's wild.
100%. Yeah, you see that happen a lot. So, for everyone who's joining us this evening, thank you. I want to remind you that you are welcome to participate in our conversation this evening by posting your questions for Erin in the chat and also for responding to some of the questions that I'm going to have. You can add your input and your answers too. And we're going to start with a very important question, which is what is your favorite Bath and Body Works scent?
So it's funny that you bring this up, and I feel I know why you brought this up. In the backtrack, I there's a lot of 2000s nostalgia, including like roll-on body glitter from Bath and Body Works. For me, it was this like blue raspberry scent that I don't even know if they still have. Um, but I would roll it on, and it kind of smelled like sprinkles. It was hard to explain, but I heard recently that it's coming back. Like they are bringing back roll-on body glitter, which feels really important.
Oh, not just the scent, they're bringing back the actual roll-on body glitter.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I
So I'll
feel
be
that's
checking that
yeah.
out.
I feel like that like falls right in line with like the chaperone crowd. Like I feel like that could
Oh,
probably like slide right in with
totally.
the body glitter. Yeah,
Yeah.
so my favorite scent, which they also don't make anymore, was Frisia.
Oh,
That was my favorite. So
I actually can see that bottle in my head. It was kind
yeah.
of like pink, right? It
Like
had
a
like a
purple, yeah, like a purple, yeah. And it was yeah, I love that scent. And then sometimes they'll do like those things where they'll bring it back for a little while.
yeah.
And then like I need to be like Elaine from Seinfeld with her sponge and just buy all of it before it goes away. But if you have a favorite Bath and Body Works scent, you can share it in the comments. And yeah, so it is mentioned, like Erin said, because it is one of the touchstones of the late aughts, really, that they discuss in the backtrack
Yeah.
for certain reasons. Because this story, even though it is a contemporary romance set in modern times, there is an element to the story that takes us back to 2009 specifically. So we take a little bit of a 15-year jump back in time. So why don't you share a quick summary of the backtrack for us?
Yeah, so, when I was writing the backtrack, I thought a lot about movies like Sliding Doors and 13 Going on 30, which involve kind of traveling back or seeing an alternate version of your life. And so for me, I had a lot of questions about like the what ifs of my life, like what if I had never left my small beach town in Florida? What if I had stayed with my high school boyfriend? What if I had not gone to college in Boston and I stayed in Florida? So I wanted to answer that with this book. And so the summary of the book really is, Sam, our lead, has to come back to her small hometown to clean out her childhood bedroom because her grandmother has decided to move out. And as she's doing it, she stumbles across this old CD player she had and she used to cherish. And she finds that it still works. And so the other thing she left behind in Tybee Island, Georgia, is her best friend from childhood, Damon, who she hasn't seen in this time. And so the CD that's in there is one that Damon made her and she's never listened to. But when she listens to it, she's brought back in time to the moment that he gave her the CD. And she sees what would have happened if she had kissed him that night. And in real life, she didn't kiss him. She leaves Tybee. She becomes an international pilot. But in this timeline that she gets to see, she sees, okay, what actually would have happened if I had stayed and I had kissed him?
Right. So and that question, that what if question, is kind of like the driving force of the story, and is such a we'll talk about this more later, but I feel like it's such a thing that everyone can connect with. It's universal that we all have those what if moments, those
Mhm.
crossroads, which we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But yeah, so yeah, because your book totally reminded me of 13 Going on 30, Sliding Doors, The Lake House. There's like this element of magical realism in it. Why did so your earlier books, your other stories, the For Better or Worse and the Plot Twist, those are straight up contemporaries. What made you decide I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction this time?
I think this was a book specifically that I had always wanted to write, and I had always been thinking, what would my version of these stories be? Because again, I think I'm just someone who will wonder, about all of these little choices we make in our life and how they lead us to where we are, even small things where it's like, oh, if I had gotten in my car 2 minutes later, would I have like gotten in this fender bender, or just these small things. So I think for me, this was like a question that I needed to answer, and I thought it would be really fun to do it through this lens of like also getting to view 2000s nostalgia, which is something I am super obsessed with. And specifically, I got to do a lot around emo music, which was really fun. Um, but yeah, I think in terms of like why I chose to do this, I pitched it to my editor. It was sort of like, I hope this works, because it's a story I really want to write, and luckily it resonated with her too. So, yeah, I was able to kind of deviate from contemporary and try out this magical realism angle.
Yeah, and I think there's 100% a space in the genre, and right now too, where there is room for these stories that kind of like cross these boundaries. And you see
Totally.
it with like Ashley Poston, and like, this kind of you have these elements of magical realism kind of piece, like leaking in, and
Yeah.
it makes it for it kind of like, and like in a lot of ways, like how telling this story in this is such a great kind of like device, like story device, to tell this story through this element. And for you, the magical realism element is this magical CD player that, she takes the batteries out, she checks it, she looks at all these different things, and how is it still working, why is it still playing, and every time she plays a song off the CD, the playlist, like it kind of takes her to a moment in her life from the past, and kind of that, starting with that crossroads, starting with that kiss that she chose to not make happen, that of course in the alternate universe, it does happen. And I really love how you refer to her past self as Alt Sam, the character as Sam, and as Alt Sam. So it was helpful as a reader to like to keep them separate, but also to kind of like clearly place this other person as almost like as an entirely separate entity at that point, because once you start making different decisions, you become a different person. One of my friends, Erica O'Rourke, she wrote a YA novel that it talked about this, because you mentioned even the smallest decisions, and how every single decision you make, from what you eat for breakfast to
Yeah.
what clothes you wear, to, like you said, what time you leave your house, it creates, each of those choices creates a thread of your life, and how those threads veer off into their own different worlds, and like a
Yeah.
world upon world upon world upon world. It's a fascinating concept, which kind of is mind-blowing if you really start to get into it that deeply. But because then you start to really think about, like, yeah, like, oh my god, but
Yeah,
it's
you
a
get
it's
stuck
a
in the
really
matrix. You're like, where am I? Who am I?
exactly.
Yeah.
But for her, it really narrows in on this very specific crossroads moment, and the life, the how much of a, life changing element, that even in that moment she realized it and saw it for what it was, and that's why she backed away from it, which we'll talk about a little bit more about that. I guess we can talk
Yeah.
about it now. We'll go back to the music in a minute, but like, because she comes from, there's this like deep rooted fear of staying in Tybee Island, of staying in the place that she grew up, um, partly because of her mother. And if you want to talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so, Sam growing up she has a lot of like mommy issues, abandonment issues, because when she was 14, her mother left, and there was never really a great explanation as to why she left. It to Sam felt like she didn't want to be part of her life anymore, and that her mother, couldn't. And I think, writing this as a mother, I had to really think about, what would it take for me to really like leave my child and never come back. And so, it later gets revealed that her mother was dealing with severe depression, and she had had postpartum as well. And it just kind of had snowballed, and she really needed to go find herself.
And her
And
mother was 18 when she had her, so she was a young
yeah,
mother.
she was a teen mom, and the father was not involved. And so, Sam sort of has a parallel journey in many ways, where she had to leave Tybee too to find herself, and to be able to be ready for this relationship with Damon, really. And so, in terms of her mother has definitely set her on this path where she feels that she cannot stay in Tybee because she'll end up the same way that her mother does. And so she does see in this alternate version of herself, some parallels to her mother, and it helps give Sam a little bit of empathy into what her mom must have been going through as well, which, it was hard to write those scenes, and it was, you never want your leads to be suffering too much, but yeah, there is some suffering that Sam has to do to figure out how to be with Damon.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point you bring up, is that not only do those flashbacks serve as a way for her to see what things might have been like if she'd made the other choice, whether that was the right or the wrong thing, but also that it opens her up to experience things in a way that gives her empathy for her mom that she might not otherwise have had. Because she's living the very thing that she feared, like what she feels like is
Yes.
kind of going down the same path as her mom and inhabiting that space that she was absolutely not wanting to, but it actually opens her up to see things in a different way that she might never have without this
Right.
experience of so of the CD. So how it happens is every time she plays another track on the playlist, that brings her back into another moment. So it's funny because I lived in a time where mixtapes were still actually made using real cassette tapes.
Well, I also grew up on the cusp of that, so I remember like putting in a tape into my boombox and like recording songs off the radio. You know that
Yep,
you would like
yep,
wait
yep.
for the commercial to end, and then you'd be like, "Record."
And the
It like
DJ's
took
talking over the
forever.
intro, and you're like, "Be
Yeah,
quiet."
totally. So I grew up with that and also with CDs, and then in college, you know, we had the iPods, and so like so different, but there is something about someone making you a mixtape, whether it's on a tape or a CD. And someone I recently saw on TikTok, they were like, "Oh yeah, when my like girlfriend makes me Spotify playlists." I'm like, "Oh, I guess it's still going on where people like send each other music that way." Because I haven't done that, but I thought that was cool.
Yeah, and that is kind of the evolution of it, like to now where it's a place where, yeah, before you could burn a CD for them, and then you
Yeah,
could like put together a track list that they could download onto their MP3, and now we're at a place where, yeah, you just make the
yeah,
Spotify playlist or whatnot. So so it's funny because I'm gonna take back a step because you talked about how you kind of always had wanted to write this story. This was something you had lurking in the back of your mind. Um, did you always know that it would be told through music, like that would be the way in?
no, I originally I kind of had it like, you know, she was being transported through like a door, almost kind of like 13 going on 30, like when I first started writing it. And the more I thought about it, the more it was kind of like, this doesn't feel nostalgic enough, and I feel like I want something a little different. And so I'm trying to remember like how I thought about like, oh, maybe there's like a DVD player, or maybe it's like a video she watches. But then something about the music just really clicked in my brain because, you know, writing one of these magical realism stories, it's kind of hard. You have to figure out the rules of the world, and you have to figure out like how you're going to show it. And I also had this debate over like, okay, when Sam goes back in time, like, is she going to inhabit her teenage self's body the way that you see in a lot of these movies where it's like they'll go back and suddenly they're, you know, 14 again? Or can she just kind of watch it as a bystander? And so, you know, you have to make all these choices as a writer. And, you know, for whatever reason, the music just became really fun for me when I was writing it. And that was a sign, for me at least, of like, oh, okay, I think this is the way to go in because it's flowing easily and it just feels like everything's clicking into place. That probably happens to you too, right, Melanie? Like when you're writing, where you're like, oh,
Oh,
okay, now it's all making sense. It's a
yeah.
story.
Yeah, no, I love the idea, the fact that like that wasn't something that was automatic, that you had to like think through like, okay, how is this going to work? And like
Yeah.
knowing that when you were coming up with the other ideas, the doors, the DVDs, whatever, like, no, it didn't quite fit because now as a reader reading the book, it feels so obviously perfect. You think, oh, well, there was no other thing. No, because you did such a good job.
I'm glad.
Sure that it felt fluid, that it like it, you couldn't imagine it being anything else because it fits so well for Sam and Damon's friendship and for their connection and for everything else, that the choice of the music and the fact that it's this playlist, it just really made it tied it all together. And yeah, so it is one of those kind of like gifts from the heavens where you're like, oh, that's the right thing to do. And
Yeah.
I wonder if every author has a I want to write one of these kind of, not time travel per se, but those types of, because I have the, like, you know, they talk about, you know, the back burner, back.
Yeah.
I've had a time like a story like this, a revisiting story, and for her for this character, her way in is her old trapper keeper.
Oh my
Remember those?
God, how fun. Oh my God. Yes,
And
of
tracker
course I
and like
do.
that noise the Velcro makes
Oh,
when you
the
open it.
rip. Yeah, I can hear it right
So
now.
that's the magical transportation is so whatever
Oh,
the static electricity of that Velcro.
it's kind of amazing because first of all, you should do that because I can almost then see her pencil case and like all of the do you remember the ones that had the different compartments? Oh my
Uh-huh.
God.
Well, right, and that's and each
You stole
folder
my heart.
like for it was like the flipping of the folders would be taking her to the different So
Totally.
no, but
You
that's
know,
like
my husband said something really interesting, and he's a TV writer, and he does a lot of sci-fi writing. And
uh-huh.
so when I was starting to outline this book, I was like, I don't know. And he was like, well, here's the thing, is like you get to make up whatever you want. He was like, if you want it to be that there's like a spark of electricity or something whenever she touches it, and that's the thing, he's like, then make it that. And it just sort of opened up I was like, oh, right, I'm the author of this. I get to
It's
decide.
my universe.
But it's hard. It's like, it is really overwhelming then to be like, oh, right, it's my universe and I have to create it. The next book that I'm working on is also magical realism. And having to create that world again, I was like, wow, it takes a lot of work. And I have so much more respect for authors who are able to even like the romantasy authors. Like, I don't know how they do it because I don't think I can write romantasy, but like to create a whole world with all these rules, it is amazing.
Yeah, and that's because this thing with like it's like exciting and kind of like gives you a lot of space to be creative to know that it's your world and you can do whatever you want. But you
Yeah.
also sometimes it like the danger of too many choices because you have to kind of like you have to create those parameters for yourself. Like
Yeah.
because it doesn't feel it won't even though we're talking about a place that is pretend, like we know it's fiction,
Yeah.
it still has to feel real. And in order to feel real, there does have to be some set of rules, some set of guidelines that this universe follows.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
and your editors will make sure that you tell everyone those rules. Because I remember seeing all the questions. My editor was like, "Well, what happened?" And I was like, "Oh man, that's a good point. You're gonna get a tour of my house right now, Melanie."
okay, are we good or
Oh yeah, I just this is life when you have like two children and you're an author. Is literally I'm like putting a lasagna in the oven.
oh, that's fine. Yep, you gotta do what you gotta do.
You gotta do what you gotta do. Dinner's coming up. Okay, go
Look
on.
at you, look at you multitasking.
This is real life.
What it's all about multitasking. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Um, so to go back to we're going to talk more about what you're working on next, but I don't want to go there yet. So, to go back to the music,
Yeah.
so this music talks a lot about the emo music, and you use the word emo, so I'm not like calling you out here
No.
of the
Yeah.
2000s.
Yeah.
So how did that influence your writing of this book in particular, and does music play a role in your writing in general?
For sure, music almost always is the start to a book for me. Like, I'll make a playlist. Right now, I'm listening to Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time, like on repeat. And so, every book I have like a song that is the anthem. And weirdly, for this book, I made this playlist. I think like the Paramore song in the book is probably like the one that I listen to the most, but also I was listening to a lot of Phil Collins when I wrote this book because
Interesting.
he's so emotional in his lyrics, and I'm kind of obsessed with him, and he's not emo, obviously, in the traditional sense. But you know, often when I'm listening to a song, I actually can see a scene in my head, and that will inform like the book that I'm writing. And so for me, there was this Phil Collins song. It's like, how can you just let me walk away? Just let you leave without a trace. You guys didn't know you were getting like a
Well, as soon as
concert.
you said Phil Collins, that's the song that popped into my head.
So
So,
this song inspired this scene for me between um, Damon and Sam where she's trying to run again and he's like, you are not leaving. Like, that's not happening. I'm not going to let you walk away from me. And so that was the start of the book for me. And then basically, I built the plot around that scene because I was like, how do I get them to a point where he's confronting her and telling her not to run again? Um, So music is super important to me. And then with the songs in this book, it was kind of fun because like to look back at at the songs that were there, like there was Twilight came out during this time, and I was able to write a scene into the book where she's a big Twilight fan, she's a Twihard. They go to see the first Twilight movie in the book, and it's the scene where all of the vampires are playing baseball. It's like one of the most iconic, ridiculous scenes in the movie, in my opinion. But you hear like Muse's supermassive black hole, and so getting to write that in was really fun. And just brought back so many memories for me because music was really a language for my friends and I when we were growing up, and so in a different way than I think it is now for kids. Like, we used to like listen to an entire album. I'll probably like sound so old because kids are gonna be like, why is she like saying that? But it's like you would listen to an entire album. Like you wouldn't just listen to a song.
Well,
And now it's different.
Well, it's funny you say that because my youngest she just turned 16 and
Yeah.
she has such an affinity for the early zeros. Like I don't know what it is that she connects with it, that
Yeah.
and part of it is this kind of idea of being able to listen to an entire, I mean, we say album, but she thinks of
Man.
CDs as vintage. So like she's taken all my CDs
Yeah.
and uh, and just is really connected, not just with the music, but like with the aesthetic, the clothing. Like she
Yeah.
is, I don't know.
Well, and
When it,
remember like the album sleeves where you would like open it
yeah,
up and
and
it
that's
would
I luckily was my husband got rid of all that stuff and made fun of me for keeping it all, and like I was able to like make sure because back then you took all of your CDs out,
yes,
put them in like the
the
organizers,
sleeves.
the
Yeah.
albums that you could, but no, I kept all of my inserts,
So
and she
amazing.
loves going through them. She loves poring over them, and but she's
That's
just
awesome.
so um so for kids now, it's like, yes, they don't have the same experience, but they like also that we were all listening to the same stuff because our access to it was like what was
Limited, so
there now.
limited,
But
yeah.
now it's open, everything is open wide to them,
That's true.
and which is kind of cool that they're experiencing and exploring the older stuff. Well, I say older stuff. Like for example, I discovered and fell in love with Depeche Mode when I was 15, huge
Oh,
into them.
yeah.
She fell in love with Depeche Mode at 15, and we went and saw a concert together last fall.
Whoa,
We
that's
went and saw
really
Depeche Mode
cool.
together, which was such a weird thing. Yeah, like to do that, but so one of my questions was going to be for you was if you could see a band from your high school days that you absolutely love, now, who would it be? Like what band would it be that you'd want to see? Obviously mine was Depeche Mode, but like
Well, I think, if we're talking about bands like emo bands or like anyone.
I think whatever like comes to mind to you that like something that from
Well,
your teen years that you would be like to see them today.
I would really love to see, probably like Fallout Boy, which was weirdly like not a band I was able to see as a kid, even though they toured a lot. I feel like I saw a lot of indie emo bands, but Fallout Boy like just never really made it to a concert. But I feel like they would be a lot of fun and super energetic. The band that I saw recently that I was super surprised by was Garbage. They
Oh,
opened for Alanis Morissette, and I went to that
oh,
concert.
that would be a great. So speaking of like talking about concerts, like for that right there is my high school like
Yeah.
Garbage
I mean, Garbage was so great. I was, like, really shocked
and
because I
Alanis
knew a lot
Morissette.
of their songs, but their energy was amazing. It
I
just,
think
like,
Alanis.
lit up the whole audience. It was great.
I think Alanis like Jagged Little Pill was like the biggest hit like CD of like my like 16-year-old summer or whatever like that. So like right
So,
in there.
yeah, I think it was, like I can't remember, maybe it was, like, the 20th anniversary, something insane like that where you're like, "Oh, okay." Of Jagged Little Pill, but she did the entire album. But I will say it was funny, like, she came out and she was wearing, like, maybe it was, like, a giant, like, bedazzled cat shirt, and, like, she just kind of it was almost like she's sung these songs so many times, and she sung them, but it was like compared to Garbage, the energy was so low, and I was like,
Interesting.
yeah, I was like, this is really interesting too because I came to see Alanis, but I'm really loving Garbage.
That's
So
an interesting, yeah, and I still the Garbage still on my playlist too.
yeah,
For the readers watching, if you have a band that like from your high school years that you would want to go see today, like the band that you would pick to see today, you can share that in the comments. So I'm gonna get a little personal now, Erin, because the fact that you chose Sam's senior year to be 2009, and that so much of the story kind of is filled with references to that year. Was this a case of write what you know? Uh, and I'm sorry. So is this around the time that you were in high school? Did you choose that time
no,
specifically? Okay, see, I
yeah.
was wondering. I wasn't sure. So okay,
I'm older than Sam.
okay.
So Sam is, I think, maybe 32 or 33 in the book. And I'm turning 40 in January. So in 2009, I had just moved to LA. Like I had just moved to LA, I'd graduated college. Um, and, but for me, part of the fun and part of why I picked that era was that that was also a time that was super formative for me. You know, it was like
Hmm.
my early 20s. All of that music I listened to and all of those clothes I still wore. And that's the time when I felt like maybe most like I was coming into who I was. And
Yeah.
so, it's like that early 20s, now you're on your own, you're getting jobs, you're doing all that stuff. And so those years were really special for me. And so I was really happy to kind of dive back into them. But I did wrestle with like, okay, like how old is she and when was she in high school? And ultimately this felt the most fun for me to write.
Well, yeah, and I think that makes you make a good point. Like, no, you weren't a high school, but you were just a few years ahead of her. So like, still kind of being able to connect to all those different elements. Like for me, like 2009, like I just had my second kid, so I was like in the mom zone where I was
Yeah.
like feeling so out of touch, and I was like, okay, so the touchstones you use, you talked about the Bath and Body Works scents, you mentioned Dunkaroos,
Oh my
um
God. Oof.
and obviously a lot of the all the music. So these I feel like those are like kind of like aught and the body glitter, like aughts Easter eggs is kind of what I kept calling them, like the aughts
Yeah.
Easter eggs. And I was thinking about like if I were to like include Easter eggs of like my high school time period, like it would definitely be like flannel. There'd be a lot of flannel.
Well, you know what's fun is like when you're doing your research for the book with the Trapper Keeper, um, I feel like I can't remember who did this and where I got this tip, but there was an author who was like, I read books and magazines from that time. Like I'll go to the library. And so I was looking up like Bop and like Teen Vogue and 17 magazine, and Delia's catalogs, like basically all of
Oh, the
these
Delia's
things.
catalog. There you
Yeah.
go.
But that helped me because I was able to see like, oh, they're selling this stuff. Like this
Mhm.
was what was popular and this is how they talked. And so that was really great.
And they don't have those anymore. There is no more teen magazines like that. I mean,
It's a
it's
bummer. Those were like my lifeline. I feel like I remember just like reading this. And also my mom would let me buy Cosmopolitan, like the like Cosmo, like not even the teen Cosmo one. I don't know why she let me read those. I was way too young with like all of their
all the
tips.
sex
And
tips. Yes.
yeah, it was just like nonsense where they were like, okay, now put honey all over his body in the middle
I was
of
just
the
gonna say 10
woods.
ways to
And
like spice up the blow job. Yeah, like that was
yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
good for your mom though. I think that's a
She just like yeah, she just had no idea, I think. She was just
oh,
like,
okay. She
"Yeah,
was
it's a
more
magazine."
oblivious than like
Uh-huh. Yeah.
so that's another question for the readers. Like if you had to pick like some touchstones of your high school time, like what would they be? Like if I mention like the Pearl Jam, there's a iconic Pearl Jam shirt that everyone had in my year in high school. I did not personally because I didn't follow all the trends, but that 9 out of 10 kids prefer crayons to guns was everywhere. And we haven't learned to think. But like if you had like so if you had to pick like other so for yourself, for high school, since you were a teensy bit earlier, was there anything, would there be anything different that you might have chosen as a touchstone that you could think of?
Well, I feel like, my era of high school was like everyone was obsessed with Abercrombie. It was like Abercrombie and Hollister. It was the low-rise jeans. It was sort of the popped collar, like the fake
Yes.
tans,
Okay.
super. And, as a redhead doing a fake tan, you're just like one giant carrot.
I
But
know exactly what you're talking about, because there is like a TikTok trend where women will like relive that time period in their life and do their makeup that way, and it's kind of like this like kind of like loving mockery of themselves.
it's
Yes. Yeah.
amazing. It really is. Like the fashion that we had was so amazing. Like the movies that came out around that time for me, like 10 Things I Hate About You came out, and I remember seeing that. I think I was like a freshman.
1999 is the year that came out. I have that
Yeah.
like
Yeah, so I
memorized.
was a freshman in high school, and I remember, like, seeing Kat with her, like, 2 little, like, strands and her, like, big hair and just, like, falling in love with her. I was like, "This is the vibe. This is everything." Um, so probably, like, including movies like that, and definitely
Mhm.
walking into the Abercrombie and just being hit with that, like, wave of cologne and, like, all
Yes.
of that stuff.
Yeah, that's, I mean, and I think all of that is like another door in for your readers, like a way in for them, and to
Totally.
connect like that. I want to talk a little bit more about your characters. So Sam is an international, as you mentioned, international commercial pilot. So why did you choose that particular career for her?
Well, I like writing women who often are in roles that are traditionally male dominated. So, my first book, For Butter or Worse, Nina is a female chef. And so, part of why I did that was because I was noticing like all of these cooking shows that I loved watching, it was mostly male dominated. And when I started doing research, I found out it was something like 17% of kitchens were run by women and the rest is men. And they
Hmm.
also did a breakdown of like the top 20 highest paid chefs, and only three of them were women.
Hmm.
Um, and so that really interested me. And so then I fell down this rabbit hole with her where, I kind of made her more of a male dominated person where she was more candid in her feedback. She wasn't this like nurturing Ina Garten type of woman. And so with Sam, I was looking at careers again that were not super friendly to females, and I was really shocked to find it's like something like 4% of pilots are women. And so, that was just interesting to me, and I just kind of like highlighting women and careers where the woman is doing something that traditionally has been held by men, and she's being very successful at it. And so, yeah, I don't have personally any experience with flying, but my dad has his pilot's license. And so I was asking him a lot of questions about some of the like stuff with the wheel. And like, there's in the opening chapter, I mentioned like a rodeo approach, which was a term that he told me about. So it was kind of fun to be able to talk to him about that.
That is cool. So funny. So side, yeah, my father, he's passed now, but he got his pilot's license as well. That was like a dream of his,
I
to
feel
get his
like it's
pilot's license.
something about that era of men that just like they really all got their pilot's
I
license.
wonder. Yeah, I and it like yeah, because it was so yeah. So I flew up with him a couple of times. I actually
That's
happened
cool.
to ride with him when he was learning stalls. That was not the best time to be up in a plane with him, and we were actually in one of those little Cessnas. So
Oh
like
my god.
when Sam takes Damon on the plane, like I understood Damon's concerns, because those little Cessnas are like you can like when you're it's yeah, it's an experience for sure. So that yeah, I love that that's a like a active choice you're making to choose careers for your heroines in male dominated fields. That's really cool. And yeah, it is a fascinating, like it's that it like in Sam herself even mentioned, when she started, when she was interested in starting back as a teen, what the stats were, and like
Yeah.
even and where she was as an adult, they hadn't changed that much. And I was thinking when I was reading this, because I was on a flight once where it was two female pilots, like, and they even made a point of saying something about it, and I was like,
Mm.
this is so rare that you have to like let everyone on the plane know. Like I was like, that's awesome, but like also like this is a problem that you feel like you have to make this an announcement, like, look how special.
You know, I was reading like a lot of Reddit threads about it, and they were just saying it's a really hard career because you are going, and in all these different locations, and there's not a lot of downtime to even have a relationship. And, you know, the expectations on women, as you know, are so different than they are on men. So, but they are obviously the highest paid in that industry in terms of like if you're going to be a flight attendant or a pilot, like who's getting paid more, it's going to be the pilots. So, yeah, very
Yeah, and I
interesting.
think it also is a great choice for Sam because of that desperation and desire to get out, to get away, to
Mhm.
travel, to be, and so it just fits so neatly and perfectly for her. And then
Yeah.
for Damon, so his choice to become, he owns a microbrewery and is a brewmaster. So where did that come from?
Yeah, so he originally, I had Damon as a nurse.
Which is what he sidetrack, like not like full spoiler, but like small spoiler. In the past, when do we see Damon? His life choices change, and he leans toward becoming a nurse. Yeah.
Yeah, he follows his dad down that route. And I think I chose the brewery master because I thought it would be a career where he could still kind of be involved in music loosely, like he has bands that are coming. And also for me personally, you know, I guess I was thinking a lot about my dad when writing this book, which is interesting because her dad is not in the picture at all. But my dad loves making moonshine. He like started his own like side thing doing moonshine with his buddies. So I
Well,
think I
not
was like,
flying planes.
yeah, not while flying planes, thank God. Um, but I think something about that kind of inspired me. This idea of you know making something of your own was sort of exciting to me. And we do have a question in the chat
Yeah, I
too.
just saw the beep, so I was like, "Oh, let's go look." Incoming question. Ah, okay. This is actually a great time since we're talking about characters. Let's grab this too. So Teresa asked, how do you? Oh, weird noise. Well, hopefully it's not my. I
No,
live in the
not anymore.
Midwest.
That was
Okay, not
earlier.
anymore
Yeah.
because I live in the Midwest and the cicadas are really loud outside right
Oh,
now.
funny. Oh,
So
that's
I don't know.
hilarious.
It could be the cicadas. Anyway, Teresa asked, how do both of you make decisions for your characters' behavior and decisions, especially when the characters are not like you at all? Great
Melanie, do you want to
question.
try this first? You want me to?
No, no, I'll let you think. I can let you think a minute. That's a great question, Teresa, and it's really because, especially, when Aaron was talking about Sam's mother, and Sam's mother kind of like taking off, and she had to think about like what would it have to be to make me leave my children. And honestly, the answer is probably, I mean, for me, there would be like, I can't think of anything that would. So having to like, how do I come at a character like that who is not like me at all? So for me, when I definitely do write characters that aren't like me at all. I feel like it's almost like from the outside in, because that's how you would approach someone when you are befriending someone who maybe isn't like you, and kind of figuring out, what about this person that seems to have nothing in common with me, but I want to like hang out with them. What is it about them that I find interesting, that I like? And so I start figuring out those pieces of that person, and then it helps me kind of figure out how, why they are the way they are, because that's the biggest piece of it, because it can be really hard for readers to empathize with characters that are not like them. So we have to find that way in. And then Aaron, you can.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because, you know, my first two books involve celebrities. They're like Hollywood celebrity romances. And I think the way that I've always thought about them is sort of like I start with personality traits. So for example, with Sam in the Backtrack, I started thinking of her as a bit of a perfectionist. She's someone who kind of puts up a mask to cover and run away from her past self. So then I started thinking, okay, what kind of a person would want to do that? What would have happened to her that made her do that? And so I get really into their backstories and just sort of like what other personality traits they would have. So, like, if she is someone who doesn't want anyone to recognize her from the past, well, now she's going to dress completely different than she did as a teenager. Like, she was emo then, right now she's going to be super put together. She's going to drive a Mercedes because she cares about what other people think of her. Like, all of this stuff um, that that I kind of flesh out for my characters. So, kind of, even though I'm not Sam and I don't relate to her in a lot of ways, I try to get into the mindset of like, well, if I were this kind of person, what would I do and what would my actions look like?
Right. And so yeah, because I think that's so, Teresa, I think it sounds like what we're both saying is figuring out the why. Like
Mhm.
why. And actually that's an interesting point that like, oh, light bulb moment. Because I was an actress, I was a theater major, and the way to get into the characters I was playing, often who were nothing like me, was figuring out the why. If
Yeah.
you understand the why, then you can understand that character.
Don't you
So
feel like that's really helpful that you were an actor? Because I feel like actors are able to really get into that mindset and also with dialogue. I bet that's been a real help.
yeah, I think that's, I mean, this is not about me. But I think for me, yeah, I think dialogue has always been the easiest piece of writing for me. And I think it's 100% because of
That
the,
background.
the background, the acting background.
Yeah.
So let's segue over to you. Before you started writing, well, because you wrote nonfiction before, and I know you also worked with BuzzFeed.
Yeah.
Um, so like, have you always had a career that was writing adjacent, or?
I think most of my career has been, yeah, writing adjacent. I think I always wanted to write books, but I was really scared to write them because I didn't know how to make money from them at all, and I didn't know anyone who wrote books. Both of my parents are in medicine. Like, what do I know? And so I started doing jobs that were sort of related. Like my first job in college, I worked at Random House. I was like an editorial assistant there. And so I was helping other writers. Um, and that was cool, but not fulfilling. And so I was like, I got to try something else. I worked when I moved to LA, like worked at a talent agency with screenwriters. And so, I was always kind of like next to them. And then working at BuzzFeed was really a dream for me because I was like, oh, I'm getting paid to write. Like, this is what I've always wanted. Um, but during that time, I got this opportunity to write a nonfiction book. Actually, an old coworker from Random House approached me and he said, we really need this like kind of coffee table fun book called Woman Skills, and we're looking for a funny writer. Could you be that? And so that was actually my first book, was this nonfiction book. And then after that, I pitched the Big Redhead book, which was another nonfiction book for my fellow redheads and the people who love them. But I had done that because at BuzzFeed, I wrote so much about redheads and so much of that content went viral. And so I was able
Mhm.
to show publishers like, hey, redheads really are proud of being redheads. And like, I think there's an audience for this. So those were like my first like kind of forays into books. And I, in the back of my mind, always wanted to do fiction. I was just really nervous about it. So I finally did it and just gave it a shot. But I've written a bunch of books that will never see the light of day, or I wrote half of them, that kind of thing, leading up to For Better or Worse, my first one.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. That like the kind of like how things kind of, all these pieces that fell into place for you to be where you were, where they reached out to you about the nonfiction book, and then how your time at BuzzFeed and all the articles and things you wrote about redheads being the thing. Because as a nonfiction writer, you have to prove that there's a platform, you have to prove that there's an audience, and you kind of have
Right.
this the material to show, hey. And yeah, I 100% understand why, because it's always, I mean, I personally find it fascinating, but I am a redhead. It's like, I feel like it is one of those things where if you're out somewhere in public and you see another redhead, there's this
Oh, yeah.
automatic like connection. Like
I mean, I remember like seeing your avatar on social, and that's actually how I found your books because I saw this like beautiful red hair, and I was like, "Oh my God, who is this?" And that's how I found you, Melanie. So
well,
redheads always stick
we
together.
always recognize each other. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. We have to.
So Teresa has some other questions for us, which is great. And I do want to point out that Madison Fairbanks was mentioning that there's nothing wrong with a little body glitter. And she likes the Christmas winter candy apple and is not
Oh,
afraid to wear it all year long,
oh,
which
I'm ready for the holidays. I'm sure everyone else is too. I'm like so ready
I
for it.
have the vanilla bean Noel, and I feel like that's a
Oh,
year round scent too.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but speaking of the questions here, so she's asking, so Erin, when writing the backtrack, you both mentioned there are many things that can change a person, infinite possibilities. What makes you decide which path they take? What
So
exact
I
events? Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
I feel like something important to think about when you're writing. This is not like unique to me. This is something that my husband said, and he probably found from someone else. But there's what a character needs and what a character wants. And so, something that really informs most of what my characters do, I think about what the character initially thinks that they want. So, for example, with the backtrack, Sam thinks that she wants to get out of Tybee as soon as possible and leave it behind once and for all. That's what she thinks. What we find out is what she needs is really to find someone who's able to break through her exterior and accept her for exactly who she is, and that's Damon. And so part of what changes them and what leads them on their path is that I want Damon to be the person who helps her fulfill that need, that actually helps her see that the thing she needs is right in front of her. And so I when I have two leads, I think about what they think they want and what they actually need, and that always impacts their path, and how they are traveling through the story. So ideally, you have that going in, and that should inform all of the actions they take. So if at the beginning Sam thinks she wants to get out of Tybee, all of her actions are going to reflect that. Like she's going to be trying to leave, trying to leave, trying to leave. But through the course of the story, she's going to start realizing, oh, there's something here that I need to look at. I need to like examine this more, and Damon is the one helping her do that. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that that's like for any author, that's like such a core element of storytelling. And I've often heard it referred to as the misbelief,
Mm,
where the character has this kind of set thing that they're telling themselves, like the thing that they think they need, and it's actually, the story is figuring out what they really need. Yeah, so
yeah.
100%. And how like that's leading to the choices or the things that they choose. We're going to wrap it up here pretty soon, but since we're talking about crossroads now and making those choices at a crossroads, um getting personal again, uh if you had to think back on your life, um is there a moment where you were faced with a choice? And again, we're not talking about the basics about like what time you left the house or whatever, but like these bigger moments that if you had to reflect back on, like I made this choice at this moment and it took me down this path. Is
Yeah.
there a moment that sticks out to you as where, not that you regret not taking that road, but that you're curious or wonder what would have happened if you did?
Well, there are a couple of moments that I can think of. I mean, one of the moments that I think was so pivotal for me was deciding to go out of state for college because had I stayed in Florida, I don't know what my life would look like. And I often wonder, like, would I have found writing? Would I have found it sooner? Like, I don't really know. Because going to Boston for college and then that led me to, getting an internships that led me to go to New York for a year. And then, just that ability to kind of feel comfortable leaving home and everything I knew came from that one decision. And then I think the other choice I wonder about is, I was so in my head in college and after college about this concern of like making money, which is a real concern. Like you have to make money to live. Um, but I was so fixated on it that I became convinced that I didn't really have a future in writing books, and I had to be kind of book adjacent in order to um, tap into that passion I had. And I often will wonder, like, well, what would have happened if I had taken a risk on myself earlier? Like, how many books would I have written by now? That kind of thing. So I wonder about those things for
I think,
sure.
yeah, I especially for people in creative fields, like that and what an amazing thing it would be if we had the ability to. And that's why I think for so a lot of times like this it is a privilege or a risk, like to like, because I myself I like told myself, I want to take a year and try and break into the to like with acting, to break into having an acting career after college. I'll
Right.
take a year and do that, but I still need money and I still need insurance, so I'll start applying to teaching positions and see
Right.
what happens. And of course I got an offer right away, and well, I'm not going to turn down health insurance and a steady salary, so
That's right.
there went the option of just of doing theater in Chicago and seeing what happens. And it's like, oh, so we're doing Second City, and getting my spot on SNL is now gone for
Oh my God. Oh my God. I
so
like
yes.
want to do a whole chat with you just about your career prior to this because I'm so curious
No,
now.
that's the career that didn't happen.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I want to know like what led you here and everything because
And
it's
it's but
interesting.
because it's such a fun conversation. It's such an
Yeah,
interesting conversation. I mean, one of
totally.
my favorite questions is always asking, because Aaron has been on I have a meet cute show that I do sometimes, where I
Right.
ask authors about their meet cutes with their significant other, which I find fascinating as an author. But I think we could also do a whole series on on paths to becoming a
Yeah,
writer,
what was your
and
path?
what, because
Totally.
any panel I do, any chat I do, in general, readers always want to know, how did you get here? What did you do to get here? So that could be like, you want to start a podcast, Aaron?
Yeah, actually, I do. I was just like, oh, this is great. We should do this, Melanie. We can do this. Two redheads talking about paths.
Talking about the journey to
Okay,
okay, well, we do have to
thanks
wrap it up.
everyone for prompting this because we're
we,
gonna
we
do
might
it
have
now.
to we might have to look back at it, and we can credit
But I
Love
was
Sweet
trying to
Arrow.
think too, like, I mean, it's really hard to think of a writer who like just came out and was like, this is it. I'm gonna do this.
I
It's
mean,
really
it
hard.
happens, but I think it's probably rare. And I think
Rare.
there is an element of either, and I don't say this disdainfully, but I think there's an element of privilege where you
Yeah.
have the space and the comfort to do that. Um, or they're just straight up braver than me and are willing to sleep on someone's couch for however
Right.
long it takes.
Somewhere in that area. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I feel like it's on it's one or the other. And that's a whole nother conversation. And I know we got to wrap it up here soon, but this has been so great. Before we go, I want to make sure we talk a little bit about what you're working on now, so if you can fill us in on that.
Yeah, I'm rewriting like second draft of a book called Not You Again, which will come out next November. So it's a ways off, like November of 2025. And it is a little bit of Groundhog's Day meets Palm Springs. So
Ah,
it's about two people who are stuck in Julian, California, which is like a small kind of apple orchard kind of town. And their whole small town is on a loop. So everyone is reliving the same day over and over again. So unlike Groundhog's Day or Palm Springs, where it's only, one or two people, like everyone knows that they're looping. So we start the story in day like 238 and it's just chaos because if you know that like nothing matters and everything is gone, like you just are in total
you,
chaos.
if you
So
restart, that's fast. Oh my, I love it. I love that. And I love the fact that, because it's another parent, like magical realism with
yeah.
some other, the reason why I had such a big was because when we watched Palm Springs when it first came out, it was it blew me away with how much I liked it. Like I maybe I had low
It
expectations
was really
going
fun.
into it, but it was a really fun movie. It was clever. It was a little dark, but it was witty. I felt like that HEA was earned in a way I didn't expect it to be, so validly earned, and so I liked
Yeah.
it a lot.
Yeah, I think this book is like for people who love Palm Springs but thought it should be hornier. That's
Okay,
gonna be
so
my
when it
book.
comes to like high concept elevator pitches, that was perfect. Yes.
Great.
So if you haven't seen Palm Springs, make sure you go watch it. It was a super fun rom com, and then make sure then you can
Yeah,
pre-order.
that's like a great Friday night watch, actually.
Yeah,
Maybe I'm gonna rewatch that tonight when the kids
and
go.
then after watching it, go pre-order Erin's next book, Not You Again, which I love that title, which is
Yeah,
great.
it's fun.
So anything else you want to share before we wrap this up?
No, I'm so grateful I got to spend an hour with you and talking to you, and we're gonna have to do this podcast now.
I think we might have to talk a little bit more about that, and then I will
Yeah.
wrap this up, and then your lasagna will be done. And see, look how well you multitask. Thank you, everyone who joined us this evening and contributed to the chat. If you're watching this, later after the live is over, you can still comment and let us know your favorites. If you're the band you'd want it, you can still answer these questions, and because people watching this later will read those comments, so it adds to the conversation. And make sure you check out Love Sweet Arrow to pick up Erin's books. And we'll see you later. I think that's it. Thanks so much for having us.
Have a great weekend.
Bye. So now we'll just wait for whoever's in charge. If you're still watching, you're getting to watch behind the scenes. We'll wait till
This is
whoever's
real
in
life. I'm like, do I go check on my lasagna again? Do people care?
charge. I can check and see if anyone else had any other comments to share with us. Take a look here. Oh, Madison is saying it was a fun conversation. Thank you.
Oh, thanks,
For
Madison.
being here. Yeah. So it was some good questions. So
Great.
and I mean, no joke. Like I will follow up with you on like, do we want
Me
to try
too.
this?
I want to do it. I've been
Here's-
like wanting to do something like that for a while, and that topic is really fun.
Yeah, I think like it's something that everyone's always curious about, and it's a fun
Yeah.
thing for authors to talk about. So we can chat more about that later. And I'm gonna just ask a question in the chat, like if Ariana's planning to wrap this up.
You guys, the lasagna looks great. It's done.
Nice job. Look at that. So you so you managed to get all that done. See, I sent my family out of the house.
I did too. They're gone. They're just gonna come back and have dinner. That's the vibe that I'm going for this evening. Okay. All right, we did it. We did it, everyone.
Yay. Woo. So go watch Palm Springs and then bye.